passing on October 10th, 2018. Mr. Bertram served in the United States Navy aboard the USS English, DD 696, during the Vietnam War. Thank you. President Haley is not able to be with us this evening, and I got a message from Counselor Fred Chase that he would not be able to be here tonight either. So it's just the seven of us, and I wanted to remind everybody that is here this evening that this meeting is being aired live and is being recorded. Even though you can't see any cameras, they can see you. I'll entertain a motion on the...
Much like Homeland Security.
Yes. Item A on the agenda is approval of our minutes from our previous meeting.
Motion to approve.
Second.
There's a motion, there's a second. Is there any discussion, Mr. Fitzgibbons?
None.
Mr. George?
None.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Minutes have passed. Announcements from the president. I have two announcements this evening. As you all know, it is early voting time here in the state of Massachusetts, and early voting has been taking place here in this council chambers on Monday and Tuesday, and early voting will continue through the rest of this week, Wednesday, tomorrow, October 24th, from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m., Thursday, October 25th, 8 a.m. to 4 p.m., Friday, October 26th, 2018, 8 a.m. to 1 p.m., and this Saturday, October 27th, 2018, from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m., and all of next week, October 29th, 30th, and 31st, from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m., November 1st, 8 a.m. to 8 p.m., and Friday, November 2nd, 2018, from 8 a.m. to 1 p.m. And of course, the election, the state election, final day to vote is November 6th, 2018. So there's plenty of opportunities for everybody to vote. Just want to remind everyone as well that the Bridgewater Veterans Council is inviting everyone to the Tri-Town Veterans Day Parade. The 2018 parade will be held in East Bridgewater on Sunday, November 11th. All marching contingents are to assemble at 11 a.m. by entering the access road to the Shaw's lot off of Laurel Street in East Bridgewater. And you can drive through the lot through to Spring Street. All marching units will assemble on Spring Street, and we will stepping off at noon and march down Spring Street into the center of East Bridgewater. So I hope that many people from Bridgewater will go over to East Bridgewater to attend the parade, and I'm sure all my counselor colleagues are invited to march as well. I have one proclamation to read tonight, and it's a great pleasure to read this, and this is sponsored by Counselor Wood on behalf of the recipient who will not be here tonight, but I do want to read it because I think it's a worthy one for the record for the council. And it is with great pleasure and respect that the town council presents this proclamation in recognition of Joyce Middleton. Whereas Joyce Middleton has been a charter member of the Bridgewater Community Lions since 2008 and the Lions since 2002. And whereas she has held many offices within the association throughout the years, and whereas Joyce Middleton has received numerous awards in recognition of her service to the association, and whereas Joyce Middleton was elected to serve a 2-year term on the International Board of Directors in Fukuoka, Japan, I hope I got that right, on June 24th, 2016. She completed her term in Las Vegas, Nevada on July 3rd, 2018, having served as one of 34 directors worldwide. So now, therefore, the Town Council of the Town of Bridgewater wishes to congratulate Joyce Middleton on her many accomplishments and welcome her home and thank her for her timeless commitment to the Lions Club Association. And that's signed by all of us on the Town Council, and I understand there'll be a ceremony later this week or this month where Councilor Wood, who is a member of the Lion, along with a few of us, will make sure that she gets this. So congratulations, Joyce.
Yeah.
Moving right along to citizens' open forum. Are there any citizens here that wish to speak during the citizens' open forum portion of this meeting? Seeing none, I will move on to appointments. We have no appointments this evening. The time is 7:35. I will open up our first hearing, which is a transfer order of general fund free cash allocation to the trust funds. So I'll open the meeting at 7:35. At their meeting held on October 9th, 2018, the Budget and Finance Committee voted 3-0 to recommend approval of this measure. On October 15th, 2018, the Finance Committee voted 5-0 to approve this measure. This measure has been duly advertised in the Enterprise and on the town's website for a public hearing and may be finally considered at the conclusion of this hearing. Is there anybody here that wishes to speak in favor of this transfer order? I'd like to direct to the town manager to give a little explanation about what this is all about.
Mr. President, this transfer order takes our undesignated fund balance, which is commonly referred to as free cash, although we like to refer to it as undesignated fund balance, as certified by the Department of Revenue, and allocates it over 5 different funds. I will tell you, for the sake of those watching, that we're certified for $3,634,080 of free cash, and that we are looking to allocate those funds over as I say, 5 funds. The Employee Liability Trust Fund for about $217,000, the General Fund Stabilization Trust Fund for $1,832,000, the Capital Stabilization Fund for $1,158,000, the OPEB Stabilization Fund for $100,000, and then the One-Time Unforeseen Trust Fund for $325,000 and change. So this is fairly routine. It allocates over those funds in keeping with the finance director's recommendation and my recommendation as well.
Are there any questions, general questions from the public regarding this this transfer order? Any general questions from the public, or anyone from the public wishing to speak in favor of what was just presented? Anyone from the public wishing to speak in favor, or any general questions from the public regarding this? Is there anyone from the public wishing to speak in opposition to this transfer order? I'll entertain any questions from my colleagues on the council. Yes, Mr. Fitzgibbons.
Could you just give a brief summary of how you came up with the percentage to allocate to each item?
Very roughly, according to 2 things. One is the council's prior free cash allocation policy, which was very roughly followed in this case, and also the finance director's recommendation, primarily to make sure that we accomplish the goal of $5 million in general fund stabilization, and then build upon that in increments. And also to make sure that we can fund capital stabilization items through our capital stabilization trust. So very generally according to those principles.
Thank you.
Any other questions from my colleagues? Mr. Columbonis.
Mr. Dutton, can you clarify I'm not sure what the unforeseen trust fund is. That's one I haven't heard of.
The council had approved, I think it was roughly a year ago, the finance director's recommendation that we create. He's trying to draw a distinction between truly capital items, for which we have a capital stabilization trust fund, and then one-time items that may not be exactly capital. So he's trying to parse out, let's just say a truck, a highway truck, versus software that we might be needing to upgrade or something along those lines. So
how would that unforeseen trust fund differ from the stabilization trust fund?
Stabilization, we're now trying to really focus on stabilization as the fund that's going to see us through a economic downturn.
So some might call that a rainy day.
Exactly.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions? Seeing none, I will entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved. Second.
There's a motion, there's a second. Any discussion? Mr. George?
Nope.
Mr. Wood? Okay, all those in favor of closing the hearing? Aye. Opposed? So the hearing is now closed. I will now entertain a motion to approve order FY 19023.
So moved.
Second.
So there's a motion, there's a second. Any discussion on that, Mr. Fitzgibbons or Mr. Wood? This does, go ahead. Go ahead, Mr. Wood.
I will. So it's, free cash has been a discussion over a number of years. And it's a question of, we've had a policy in place now for multiple years, financial policy when we dropped the budget. So in this free cash cycle, we saw an unforeseen tax lien of about $750,000. We saw our automobile excise tax grow dramatically. So these are things that you can't really anticipate for the operational side. So this is a great policy and mechanism for putting this cash away for capital projects. And so where we have the operational budget pays, people, health, and other pieces of the operational side, this sets us up to buy that truck or, fix that roof or do something else that's on our capital plan, whether it's planned or unforeseen. So I think there was a question earlier about the amount. The amount is large, but it really sets us up for some good capital projects in the near future. Thanks.
Mr. Columbotus?
So these numbers were driven, as Mr. Dutton said, largely by the percentages laid out in the town council's budget policy resolution, right? Is that right, Mr. Wood?
Close, yes.
Right.
Yep.
And that resolution really dictates percentages off of unallocated what we know as free cash. And I'm wondering if it wouldn't make sense in the future, this is somewhat germane, to not have, as opposed to a strict percentage of free cash, to have a trigger, to have a floor, perhaps for any amount from 3 to 5 million, then we have a certain percentage, and beyond that, any excess. Well, in this case, any funds in excess of an expected absolute figure would be allocated in different percentages, perhaps. So, for example, in this year, we did have this huge, rather large, significant increase in tax collections of $700,000. So that $700,000 was subject to this percentages that we laid out in our resolution. But perhaps in the future, it might make sense to say, well, that was an unexpected boon. We can dedicate that towards the general budget and not subject it to the percentages. So that's just food for thought for the future. But I do welcome, I think the budget policy is a really great, a great thing to have in place. So I'm glad we have that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other discussion, Mr. Fitzgibbons?
I'll be real quick. I believe Mr. Wood asked for comment about the policy on allocation of undesignated funds, and I don't know if you got anything, whatever. And I think we revoted it, didn't we? Or we at least had a chance to. But then secondly, the interesting thing about a tax title and back taxes that are owed that we collect is we actually spend that money in the year that we assess the tax. We give the police department, the fire department, et cetera, what we say the budget is, and then, some people, for whatever reason, we don't have taxes paid in cash, but we've made a budget allocation of a certain amount of money. So to send it back into the general budget is kind of double dipping, and I'm not sure I'd recommend that, but again, food for thought, as you would say. Thank you.
Any other discussion? Okay, this does require a roll call vote.
Mr. Souza.
Yes.
Mr. Columbotus.
Yes.
Mr. Wood.
Yes.
Mr. Gallagher.
Yes.
Mr. George.
Yes.
Mrs. Loesch. Yes. Mr. Fitzgibbons.
Yes.
7 in favor, none against.
Okay, the motion passes. We'll now move on to our 7:40 public hearing, Order FY 19024, Transfer Order Capital Plan 2019-1, Town Clerk Voting Booths. At their meeting held on October 9th, 2018, the Budget and Finance Committee voted 3-0 to recommend approval of this measure. On October 15th, 2018, the Finance Committee voted 5-0 to approve this measure. This measure has been duly advertised in the Enterprise and on the town's website for a public hearing and may be finally considered at the conclusion of this hearing. I'll refer to the town manager to give a brief description of this transfer order.
Mr. President, this transfer funds the new town clerk voting booths, which will be here in time for November 6th, samples of which you can see in the back here. And I believe we're getting close to 80 of them, if I'm not mistaken. So this will completely replace the voting booths that are very heavy and hard to maneuver, especially for older volunteers who help on Election Day. So it's a long time coming and much needed.
Thank you. Is there anyone from the with general questions from the public? Is there anyone from the public with any general questions or to speak in favor and support this order? Anyone from the general public wishing to ask any general questions or speak in favor? Anyone from the general public? Anyone from the public that wishes to ask any questions in opposition to this? Anyone wish to speak in opposition to this? Anyone at all? I'll now refer to councilors for any questions regarding this order. Any questions from the councilors? Yeah, I'll entertain a motion to close the hearing.
So moved.
Second.
There's a motion, there's a second. Any discussion on closing the hearing? Hearing none. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Hearing is now closed. I'll entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second.
There's a motion, there's a second. Any discussion on the motion? Mr. George and Mr. Fitzgibbons?
No.
No, thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, this does require a roll call vote. It does require a 9/10 vote of those present. By the way,
100%.
That's 100%.
9/10 vote of those.
I didn't think you knew math.
Mr. Fitzgibbons. Mr.
Yes.
Fitzgibbons. Mrs. Loesch.
Yes.
Mr. George.
Yes.
Mr. Gallagher.
Yes.
Mr. Wood.
Yes.
Mr. Columbotus.
Yes.
Mr. Souza.
Yes.
7 in favor, none against.
So the order passes. Moving on to our 745 zoning ordinance public hearing, ordinance FY 18008. After joint hearing held by the Community and Economic Development Committee and Planning Board on April 17th, 2018 and June 20th, 2018, both committees voted to recommend with the proposed amendments. At their meeting held on June 26, 2018, this measure was referred to the Community and Economic Development Director for further review and recommendation regarding testing facilities. Amendments were adopted on September 11, 2018. The Planning Board reviewed the updated ordinance and reaffirmed their support of the original proposed amendments on October 17, 2018. This measure has been duly advertised for a public hearing and final consideration in the enterprise on the town's website, therefore may be finally considered for this evening. And this is a zoning ordinance on the Elm Street recreational usage overlay. So we'll now, the public hearing is open. Does the town manager wish to comment on this zoning ordinance?
I would only add, Mr. President, there's a little bit of confusion about this because the reason we are back at public hearing is primarily because 90 days has elapsed, and under the law, if more than 90 days elapses between the presentation of the ordinance and the final vote, then it has to come back for a public hearing. So it came back to the council in this case for public hearing, which is what we're entertaining right now.
Is there anyone from the public with any general questions, either in favor or opposition? Is there anyone from the public with any general questions, either in favor or opposition to this ordinance? It just, as per norm, if you could just take the podium and state your name and address for the record, please.
Same as usual, okay. Taylor Sullivan, 250 Norland Park. So one question, you mentioned the 90 days, but is it also because testing was added to that? Because the original ordinance that we, like way back in April or sometime in the spring, that didn't involve zoning testing, it was just product manufacturing and cultivation.
Would you like me to
Sure.
answer that?
Yeah.
This particular hearing is not triggered by the testing component. I think the testing component was considered not less restrictive.
Right.
So therefore, that piece of it did not require a public hearing. But regardless, we're back at public hearing.
Oh, okay. Because I think the testing wasn't in that ordinance before, though, so that's why I assumed you would need a public hearing for it, because that was an add-on. Okay. So is this the time for comments now, or
Yes.
just questions? Okay. So last week at the planning board hearing, they recommended the ordinance move forward without the testing piece, as you all know, just the original ordinance from April. And the reason for that being that, none of the people that came to that hearing, none of the Bridgewater Cares Group, people that have been coming here for a year, support that testing piece of it. While many people may, consider it far less harmful, and it is obviously compared to having retail or allowing cultivation or product manufacturing, we still have a right to say no in our town, just the way people come up here and say no to a new store or Dunkin' Donuts or whatnot. So we have the right to say that. In addition, I do want to remind you that none of the towns, the towns that voted no on question 4 in our area are not allowing testing facilities either. Again, we were a no on question 4 town. So by that vote and the residents that keep coming up here, I think we've made it clear that we don't want any additional marijuana facilities in our town beyond what's going on at Theory and ACS. So I'd really ask you to take that into consideration. There's not been one person that has come up here in support of having testing facilities in our town. While you may personally not agree with that, I just feel it's your job as counselors to look beyond your personal opinion and look at what the residents have said. And then I know this piece probably won't be changed, but again, separate from the testing, as far as the product manufacturing and cultivation, I want to remind you, nobody came up here and was in support of that other than that one night on December 19th when many of the employees of Theory and ACS and customers came up here in support of them. But for 6 months, you had residents come up, you had a no on question 4 vote, and you guys went against that. And then I just want to add, I know Dennis had tried to a few times limit it to one establishment per Theory and per ACS, so just allowing them to cultivate essentially, and that is what all of the residents who continue to come up here were in favor of, and I don't believe anyone supported him on that. Maybe you did, Frank, I don't remember. But again, I just want to remind you that it's very disheartening to keep coming up here and feel like you don't have a voice and you're wasting your time by giving your opinion, that nobody takes it into consideration. It seems everyone already has their mind made up. But a lot of people have different opinions on the marijuana industry from their own personal experiences and what they've seen addiction do in their own lives. And while testing isn't selling it to our youth, it still is a part of the marijuana industry. It's still feeding into it. And I will also mention, if you research testing, you'll see it's not as professional as you may think. Some marijuana companies will find a tester that's more lenient. It's not as standardized as some of you may think. So I just really ask you tonight to really open up your minds into thinking of how we feel instead of maybe just your own personal take on it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else from the public wishing to speak, either in favor or opposition to this zoning ordinance?
Yes, there is. My name is Pat Neary, 225 Lakeside Drive. Good evening. Once again, we are here to remind you how our town voted on question 4 in 2016. You know we were a no town. Yes, it was close, as were most towns in Massachusetts, but nevertheless, we voted no to marijuana. It wasn't based on a score at halftime or after some innings or how a precinct voted. It was the final numbers that count. We voted no on marijuana retail, cultivation, manufacturing, and testing, all things marijuana. Unfortunately, we have had to allow cultivation and manufacturing in order to keep retail drugs out of our town. Now you want to expand the marijuana businesses in our town. Members of Bridgewater Cares have been faithfully attending these meetings and expressing our desire to limit drugs in our town for over a year. I know you've heard this before, but I'll only tell you probably a couple more times. And only because a few counselors have a higher regard for dollars than they do for keeping our town and neighboring towns drug-free is the reason we're still discussing this. Most neighboring towns have totally banned retail, cultivation, manufacturing, and everything. We realize that you want money for our town, but do you really want to be known as the pot town? You may or may not be aware that we already allow laboratories and research facilities in our zoning regulations. We don't have to expand for more laboratories because we already have that zoning. The planning board, in their wisdom last week, made their recommendation to keep the marijuana zoning limited to the Elm Street overlay. I hope you will too. If you want to protect our town by having fewer drugs produced in our town, please keep in mind that we can still, or you can still recommend 2 special permits and only allow 1 establishment per special permit, not 2. Thank you for listening.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else from the general public, the public that wishes to speak on this zoning ordinance? Anyone at all? Seeing none, I'll refer to any counselors for any questions, comments. Mr. Wood.
Mr. Wood.
Question first. So this is an amendment to an existing zoning, because we've already passed a zoning ordinance that effectively bans marijuana shops, correct?
I believe so, yes.
It's not an amendment,
No.
it's narrowing down the overlay district or the district in which you can actually work or cultivate or test or manufacture. So it's you're not amending it, your underlying zoning ordinance already exists, allowing for all of those uses.
That's what I mean.
With no
The underlying
limitation.
ordinance exists.
Correct.
We're effectively amending it because we're adding language that narrows down the scope of that zone, correct?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. I'll come back for a comment later.
Mr. Fitzgibbons?
Yes. This is through you to the town attorney. We heard a couple people come up during the public comment portion and talk about eliminating marijuana testing facilities from this as we have it in front of us. Were that amendment to be offered and pass here this evening, would it trigger a new hearing process as it being more restrictive?
That amendment to this particular amended ordinance would make it more restrictive, which would require a new public hearing.
So we'd have to go through this whole process
correct.
again? Okay.
Correct.
Thank you. And then we unfortunately don't have 2 councils here who couldn't be here, not out of choice, but because of necessity, obviously. So it's my understanding that of the 7 of us, 6 of us have to vote in favor of this to pass. And if it's a 5-2 vote, then this will not pass.
Correct.
And it cannot come up for how many years?
2 years.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the counselors? Seeing none, I will throw it out there to my colleagues as to whether we want to continue or close the hearing. And if we continue the hearing, we can put it on the agenda for our November 13th meeting for a vote.
Personally, I'd like all 9 counselors to be here to
Sure.
be involved in the hearing, because I think it's that important to the town that Mr. Haley, who represents at-large across the town, and obviously Mr. Chase, and we put it out till our next meeting. I don't know how this could go. If we vote 5-2 against it, then we don't have anything. And I'd like to see the full council here, but I'll make that motion in the form of a motion, and if there's a second, we can discuss it.
Okay, there is a motion on the floor, I believe, to continue this hearing to our next meeting, which I believe is November 13th. 3 weeks.
I'll second.
There's a second by Mr. Columbotus. Any discussion, Mr. Fitzgibbons?
I don't want to ask my colleagues how they want to vote, but when it comes down to vote on this motion, I'd ask you if you feel like the vote would be 5-2 against it, that you give the full council the courtesy of coming back and meeting and talking about it, and make it unanimous. And if it's, I'd actually call for a roll call vote on this. Sure. And, you know, we can see where everyone stands on it. And otherwise, I don't want to lose the process. See, we've got two issues here. We've got the public coming up to us tonight and saying, let's make an amendment, which I can be completely in favor of. But that's going to trigger a whole new hearing process. We can't, we can't do that tonight and then just vote it tonight if we make an amendment. And then secondly, if we don't make the amendment and we just vote it down 5-2, we have to wait 2 years before we can do anything. You know, that's so, you know, it just seems like we should have the full council here to have that discussion.
Mr. Columbotus?
Through you to the town attorney, Mr. Rollins, would it be improper to hold a straw poll, a non-binding straw poll?
I believe it would be, yes.
Because I'd love to get it over with and not have to wait, but...
Well, Mr. Columbotus, you could make it 6-1.
Well, I'm in support of this ordinance as written.
As written.
As amended, yes.
Okay, then I'm going to withdraw my motion.
Who seconded it?
I did.
Okay, are you seconding his withdrawal, I guess?
Right.
All right, so the motion to postpone, to table this has now been withdrawn. So now I will,
I think it was a motion to
Continue the
postpone.
hearing.
It wouldn't be to table.
No, continue the hearing.
Continue the hearing.
I withdrew
the
my
motion to
continuance of the
postpone
hearing.
has been withdrawn.
Yes.
There is no motion to table it. The next thing on the agenda, the next thing as part of the process would be I'll entertain a motion to close the hearing.
So moved.
I'll second.
There's a motion and there's a second to close the hearing. Any discussion, Mr. Fitzgibbons or Mr. Columbotus?
None.
Okay,
Nope.
this does require a roll call vote and does
Well,
require...
we're closing the hearing.
Huh?
That's the
Oh, that's
vote.
right. Entertain- All those in favor of closing the hearing?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Any opposed? So the hearing is closed. This does require a 2/3 of the full council or 6 members to support.
But we need a motion.
So I'll make a motion to approve ordinance D FY 18008.
I'll second for discussion.
Okay, there's a motion, there's a second. Mr. Fitzgibbons or Mr. Wood?
I'll go first. I made the motion. Does anybody want to offer an amendment to, you know, do what the folks asked tonight and trigger a new hearing process? I'd be in favor of it. I would second that motion, but I'd rather just get things done, and if we need to go back and, you know, as we did with the first time we did the zoning, if we need to tighten it up again, let's do that in a new process. But that's why I'm in favor of it as it is.
Nobody has any question, I just will insert myself here on this because this is something I've been involved in, and I'd like to try to stick with what the planning board originally supported on October 17th. So I would like to make a motion that, which had already failed 3 times, my motion to restrict it to 1 has been defeated before, but that would be...
You can do it again.
I can
I'll
do it
second
again. I'll entertain a motion to restrict it just to 1 use, 1 license,
I'll second that.
1 special license
Discussion.
permit. There's a second. And any discussion?
I have
Mr.
no discussion on the amendment,
Okay.
other than to say it's just going to put us off for another few months to get this done.
Yeah, there's no,
Yeah.
yeah. You've got to,
So you're making a motion to amend what? That there would only be a single special permit in the town of Bridgewater to do any of these activities? Is that right, or is it just for testing labs or is it for something else? I'm not sure.
There's
what-
three.
what language you're
There's
checking.
three different avenues for a special permit, and I would like to reduce it to one. And they could choose which one they wanted to do.
So perhaps clear language would be useful here.
So are you striking line 4 where it says 2 and changing that to 1 or something else?
I'm restricting it to, there can't be two manufacturing facilities. There cannot be two,
I know, but I'd like to see in what the change to this language
I don't know,
is.
I had it a month or two ago. I don't have it in front of me now. So whatever the planning board, I believe, supported on October 17th is what I wanted to do. I can't recognize, this is our discussion. Councilor Loesch.
Please.
Councilor Loesch. yeah.
Oh, yeah, so to your point about October 17th, that's actually the opposite of what the planning board recommended, because that's how we got here, is through a joint committee with the CEDC and the planning board, and what you see in front of you is what the planning board already had approved prior to their meeting on the 17th. So technically, they're changing their stance. It's not that we're going back with a recommendation. They already had the recommendation. It could have been approved September 11th. We had the delay, and now we're here. But they changed their mind in the past few weeks. It wasn't that the original included testing. We had very long discussion about testing. We've had very long discussion here about testing, and they had approved it. So I'm not sure what changed.
Okay.
I did not go to that meeting. But just to be clear, that's a change in their stance, not a continuation of what they asked in the beginning.
Can I follow up on that question? Because I'm not in sync here.
Sure. I'm Backstreet Boys. Hit it.
No, I'm not in sync. So what you're saying is that the planning board and the CEDC had a joint meeting and voted for this, and that's why it's in front of us?
Yes.
Then what,
And then something
where's the report
transpired
from
on
the...
October 17th meeting.
Did you have another joint hearing?
No. They made that change.
Now
as-
I'm totally confused, and I'm sorry we closed the hearing.
There was no second joint meeting. They had a meeting on October 17th, and they changed their recommendation to the council without the CEDC there.
Is that even legal?
I believe that the recommendation that came out of the planning board was everything here except for the bold language, which I believe was added subsequent to that.
I'm really confused now.
And to add, I believe this was added after that, and to add marijuana testing facility as a use.
Can someone give me a real timeline on this, please, of what came where? We had
But
it
you have
introduced
someone,
a
you have
year
someone
ago.
here that could probably do that.
Thank you.
Ms. Burke, do you mind?
Thank you. Good evening. Jennifer Burke, Director of Community and Economic Development. So just to clarify a little bit, in April and in June, the Planning Board and the CEDC did hold a joint hearing, and they reviewed an ordinance that did include cultivation, manufacture, and testing. At that time, it limited it to 2 special permits with 2, let me have to think for a second. The number of special permits to 2, and no more than 2 marijuana establishments for all 3 categories. That was brought back, I believe, to the council. At that time, you had a discussion about testing specifically, and you wanted to see additional language about adding additional testing facilities. That came back to me, and I added additional language about I took the testing out of that piece, and I added the additional language about allowing additional testing facilities. So that's how the testing facilities was always included in the 3 categories, but then you asked for additional language to allow additional testing facilities. So after June, that's what I did. In September, that's what you looked at, that's what you liked, then you asked the planning board to comment on that. Last week, the planning board looked at it, they felt that that was too much testing. They listened to some comments from the public. They felt that that was too much. They didn't know what that would look like in town. They wanted some more control over it. So they wanted to go back to their original amendment, which was to allow cultivation, manufacture, and testing 2 special permits and 2 establishments, and that was their recommendation.
Mr. excuse me.
So if I may, just so I can get this clarified, is what Mr. Gallagher is suggesting more restrictive than what the planning board wants with his 1?
Yes.
Okay, are you still in favor of that, Mr. Gallagher?
I am, but we've had this vote 2 or 3 times.
I know we
yeah.
have, but and secondly, it was my sense that the council wanted the 2 places to be able to survive as businesses, which could not be done unless they were able to grow and export out of town, so to speak. I'm not quite sure why testing became something, because I'm not sure they had testing or anything like that. So if we adopt Mr. Gallagher's suggestion of 1, will both businesses be able to survive as they believed they would?
I don't believe so, because if I understand Mr. Gallagher's motion, it's to limit it to 1.
Right.
And so
Okay.
only 1 business would be able to survive.
All right, and so then, if we eliminated testing facilities entirely and just said you can have 2 and you can export,
And you can cultivate and manufacture.
yeah, I call it exporting because it's
Sure.
easier for me to remember, would that in any way impact their businesses?
I can't speak to their business
I
plan,
know-
but
I know you
right,
can't, but-
I don't believe it.
My understanding
think
was they
that's
had
their
to be
goal.
totally separate businesses,
Sure.
they had to be
And I believe
owned by
that's their
different
goal
people.
is that's what they would like to do. So I believe that would be probably acceptable to them. Again, I don't work for them and I can't speak for their
Right,
business
no,
plan.
and I understand that, and I appreciate you, giving your best opinion on it. So, okay, I just wanted to clarify for myself. So what happened, if I can rephrase what the town attorney said, was the CEDC and the planning board voted on something more restrictive. You recommended something less restrictive. We adopted that.
Correct.
And then now it's finally here for a vote because the council adopted it.
Yes.
At the last meeting, which didn't require a new public hearing,
Yes.
but the planning board has decided to weigh in with a sense of the planning board saying, we're not necessarily in favor of that.
Correct. Because they
Okay.
had not seen it previously.
Perfect, thank you.
Thank you.
I think they asked for that.
Mr. George?
So asked for that, yeah.
Anybody else have any questions? My whole point is to just change the number 2 to 1. That was my whole point.
Did you get a second?
Yeah, I did second it for discussion, but after discussion, I'd ask you if you could just make your motion to remove marijuana testing facilities and allow the 2 businesses, which we thought last year we were going to be able to keep surviving to survive. If you don't want the businesses to survive, that's okay. But what I want to see is those 2 businesses survive, pay taxes, and get them out there. But I'm all in favor of the marijuana testing facilities going out.
Well, my understanding right now, Mr. Fitzgibbons, is that there are no facilities in town right now that are doing the recreational manufacturing or cultivation. So what business would we be hurting? Because they're not, we don't know where this will allow that. There's nobody out there in Bridgewater right now actually doing this. They're doing it medically, but not recreationally. So we're not hurting anyone's business model. Because there's nobody here doing this, correct? Am I right or am I wrong?
Well, we've been through this for a year and a
Right.
half, so
Yeah, no.
that's fine.
Mr. Columbotus?
My understanding, the rationale for allowing the 2 existing facilities to manufacture for recreational sale elsewhere was that the medical market will be undercut by the recreational market, and therefore their market, if they're not allowed to wholesale recreational, their demand for their product will diminish.
But we're
They will go out of
assuming
business.
that they get the special permits if this is approved. There could be other businesses lining up ready to come in if this is approved. Doesn't
Right.
mean,
This-
we're not approving them to do this, right?
This does not guarantee their continued existence. It offers opportunity for their continued
Sure,
existence.
sure, I
So that
understand.
is what we kind of, I think, the conclusion we came to as a council. Can I just add one point, and that is, I think there was near unanimous interest in allowing testing facilities, and that's what triggered the additional language that Ms. Burke spoke of. I'd love to see the minutes of that meeting where I believe it was near unanimous that we all thought allowing testing was a good idea. It brought there's a lot of real property taxes to be garnered, and that we saw that as a relatively benign use. So I don't know if the council clerk can summon those minutes, but that was my recollection of that meeting and why we sent it back to allow for more testing. So so it's strange to be coming back to this argument again, but.
Mr. Wood?
I'm still confused about the numbers, but, so the two operations today have a have a medical cultivation license. I don't believe that they've even applied for it. They may be in the application queue for a retail cultivation. I'm sure everyone finds our actions very confusing in terms of what people want to do for business. But when you limit it to one each, you're effectively saying that, yeah, they could do medical and retail, and then all special permits are expired. There's no more. I don't understand how a testing facility creates, or the lack of a testing facility creates a drug-free Bridgewater. We're not setting up stockade fences and stopping someone from driving back from Brockton where they're going to have 6 shops set up and people buy marijuana there who are Bridgewater residents. I don't understand how diminishing the ability to put a possible business, we're not even talking about a realistic business, because come on, common sense says if there's 8 shops in Brockton and there's cultivation in Lakeville, why would a testing facility set up shop far away from those locations? The purpose of a testing shop is, in fact, to protect children and other users. The testing facility is to make sure that fentanyl is not mixed in with the marijuana. Fentanyl, if you want to talk about a gateway drug, is the gateway drug. It's an addictive property that's added to marijuana to get people hooked onto other things. Pure marijuana is what these testing facilities are checking. The testing facility doesn't sell at the back door. The testing facility doesn't create users. The testing facilities, if it were to come to Bridgewater, would be a bonus business that we would have. So I don't understand why people want to talk about restricting testing facilities, because it would reduce the drug use in Bridgewater.
Mr. George?
Thank you. So what I want to take in a different direction. I don't want to go off topic, but I've been sitting here and I really want to get across to people here, people on TV, is a little bit of the concern in regards to the weighing of people and their opinions if they're here at a meeting or not. I applaud everyone that's come. I wish we had this many people all the time. But I also want people to understand that are here on TV that a lot of us are not taking personal preference into play. We're taking all of the feedback from our constituents. Some come. Some don't have the ability to come, yet reach out to us directly. We have to take that into consideration too. So I do take a little bit of a personal offense that if my support goes one way or another, I'm putting my personal preference in front of my constituents. That's not the case. And I think we've got a hot button right here in regards to what people feel is the support mechanism and what's good for the town. And I hope that however this goes, and to be honest with you, I don't even know how it's going to go, hopefully everyone walks away with the understanding that it may not go the way people want it to, but we're taking as much information into play as possible and trying to put together something that's beneficial for the town. Thank you.
Mr. Souza?
Mr. Chairman, I brought it up to begin with, the testing facilities. Again, we still have people who wish that we were selling it, and in the future, when it comes up for availability for a vote, I think they're going to push for it. The facilities was another way of generating taxes for the town. By turning this company away, or the potential of bringing in this, we are once again showing that Bridgewater is anti-business, take your tax dollars and cross over the line where it's happened so many times in the previous few years, and that's the end of it. But I want it here, because I want those taxes, okay? And as far as the testing, what they're doing is the director of the board was on TV the other morning, and he talked about the test sites. There's only been 2 that's been approved. Unfortunately, one of them had a break-in and a number of their products were stolen. But they've tightened up, and now the board is also adding security to the facility, as well as they are setting the guidelines as to what is going to be tested and the guidelines for every level. Okay, and they're going to be overseeing that. Now, it isn't going to hurt us at all. It isn't going to cause more production. It isn't going to cause all of a sudden the next day selling recreational marijuana. It's a business that goes hand in hand with what we already have here in town. So why not get that business in if possible, and get those tax dollars, because we all know we definitely need those tax dollars.
Thank you. Any other comment on the motion, the amendment?
We have a roll call vote?
Oh, she stepped down.
Had to run out.
The council clerk went to get the
She had to
minutes.
run out.
Oh, okay.
Can we repeat the motion to begin with, please? Begin with?
My motion is to restrict the special permit to 1. And there was a second by Mr. Fitzgibbons. Mr. Columbotus.
Can you clarify exactly where that how the language of this ordinance as written would change?
I can't.
What words would change?
I can't.
In the past, I think we've asked for asked it to be written on a piece of paper or something, so we all have clarity.
But we do have to clarify it before there's a vote. It has to be specific so that we know what you're actually voting on amendment-wise. So it has to be stated with some particularity. Otherwise, it could be unclear as to what you're voting on. So I just think it just has to be stated with some particularity.
Well, it says right here in the order, about 3 or 4 lines down, to limit the number of special permits to 2, and to allow no more than 2. I think everywhere where you see that 2, Mr. Gallagher wants to put a 1. I don't want to speak for
No,
you.
you're correct, yes.
Yeah, that's fine. That's enough specificity that at least if we had to amend the ordinance as it's stated, we could do that pretty easily.
Which means we could have 1 special permit for a manufacturer, 1 special permit for a cultivator, and 1 special permit for a testing, I guess, right? That's how it would read?
I have a question.
Yes.
So if you have a special permit for manufacturing, but you can't grow it, they have to buy it from someone else to then manufacture it?
No, 1 each. It would be 1 manufacturer, 1 cultivator, and 1 testing facility.
So if we're going to say, if we have 2 organizations in town, 1 gets a cultivation license and 1 gets the manufacturer license, how are they going to manufacture something with no product?
I don't know.
Okay.
I have no idea.
And I think under that, if you're talking about 1 being a manufacturing, 1 being a cultivation, and 1 being a testing, that would actually be 3 special permits.
Correct.
So you're actually
But
saying
1 each.
3.
My point is 1, only 1 each.
Well,
not
that's
3.
fine, but
That's
it
not
wouldn't-
three special permits for 3 testing facilities.
Oh,
No.
I understand.
Right, okay.
I'm just saying, when you propose it, at least if I'm hearing it properly, you're actually proposing 3 special permits, but only 1 special permit per marijuana establishment, if that's what I'm hearing you say.
Yes.
I think that's what I understood.
More restrictive.
That's what he's proposing.
The 2 would go to 3, the first 2 would go to 3, and the second 2 would be a 1.
That's how I understand it.
Right.
That's what I'm hearing.
Okay, so is that?
Thank you, Mr. Columbotus. Yeah, I think you read it better than I did.
Yeah.
Because we're allowing, an absolute number of permits, and then each permit can either be, 1, 2, 3, or, So it's the first number times the second number is the total number of establishments that we'd end up with.
It's more restrictive.
So one business can cultivate retail, but the other can't because the first one got their special permit first.
But the person who cultivates can't manufacture, so they'd have to
So you'd
ship
need
the
two different
cultivation
businesses.
to somewhere else that would
So
manufacture.
it would generate a new business in town, to
No.
Mr. Souza's concern, of someone with the potential to have a special permit for a testing facility.
Now, I just got to clarify something. The two businesses we currently have, okay? What did we actually approve for them to do there?
Well,
We had them grow it, process it, and sell it as medical marijuana.
right now.
Okay, the growing and processing is, no matter whether it's recreational or whether it's medical, it's the process beyond that point that makes it medical or recreational. Okay? So we've got two businesses there that we said, go ahead and grow it, process it, and sell it as medical. Okay? Now, we can't go back and say, okay, we approved it in the past, but now that you're up and running, we're going to shut one of yours down. Because if you go to one, how are you going to have one when you already approved two and they're up and running? And, you know, what we have to do is, if you want to try to restrict something, you restrict, because you're left to just restrict the recreational part of the marijuana business. We already said you can't sell it, so if you want to take it back and say, well, you know, we really don't want you to do that here, you know, we already had that long discussion, we've already had a vote on it, okay, as long as it's shipped out of town, you know, it was a compromise, if you all remember. That discussion went on lengthily, and it kind of like, let them grow it, but they can't send it in town, but they can send it out of town. That was the compromise that night that this committee came up with, this council came up with a compromise, and that's how that piece of legislation was put in for the town. Okay? And now what we're saying here today is, let's go back and wipe out part of it. Okay? And how can we do that when you got a business that's up and running? And, you know, let's control now selling recreational marijuana in town. And again, the testing facility is just going to bring us in some more taxes and show that we are.
But this is only for recreational. That's what we're talking about. This does not affect the current business.
Can I have a question?
This is only for recreational. So if this is approved, it's not, in my opinion, it's not going to affect it.
One of the two can do recreational marijuana and send it out of town, but not the other.
If they choose to do that, or another business could come in.
No, I'm talking about not what they choose.
Right.
I'm talking about what you're putting down in the paper. You're saying one instead of two.
Right.
Okay? Currently, if they get the authorization from the state, both of them can manufacture recreational marijuana and act as a wholesaler to send it out of town. Okay? That's just the way our paperwork is set up. If you take it back to one, who's going to determine which one that's going to be? And how is it going to affect that person's business over time?
Ms. Loesch?
Just to follow up on that, it would go through the process, right? So they'd have to go through the special permit process, and it would be approved by the special permit committee, and they would have to meet the special permit criteria. So that's how we would choose. You haven't yet to articulate why. So what is your logic between having that one, and what is your thought process behind it? So I don't fully understand that, and if I could, I would be able to make an educated decision on your amendment.
I think all along that what I have tried to do is to restrict the recreational piece of marijuana that we're putting down on Elm Street for manufacturing and cultivation. I've been trying to restrict that.
Okay.
We have banned the recreational pot shop piece of it.
Correct.
And I think that what this will do, this zoning ordinance on Elm Street, recreational overlay usage, would allow, I think it sets us up for a time down the road where we're not going to have any choice but to allow the selling of retail.
How so?
Because I just think that that's where it's all going to head if we allow this. But my point is that we have and authorized the medical piece of it, which I don't have a problem with. They have been in business for a few years now, and they seem to be thriving. everybody has all said that the recreational piece that's now in play is going to kill the medical piece of it, because everybody's going to resort to the recreational product rather than the medical product, and that's going to put them out of business. So this kind of gives them another leg up to have a recreational piece. So I say that I just want to restrict it. I don't think we need to be a mecca for recreational marijuana, and I think that that's kind of what this does. And I think it sends a bad message to our community by having a lot of this in town.
Okay, a mecca, just to define the word mecca, is where thousands of people go to pay homage. I do not think Bridgewater is going to become a mecca by having two facilities who can't even sell recreational marijuana to a person.
Right.
So I just want to just be clear what the word mecca means. Secondly, if we allow for only one, they can only grow it. So if you can only grow it, they then have to find someone to then make something with it. That's not going, like, they're not even going to want the special permits, and we're not even going to be able to get any additional revenues to what you're talking about, because no one's going to even apply, because it's not even going to be a permit that they can use. So we have to be really mindful about not just creating permits to create permits, knowing that it's not going to benefit anyone in town. No one's going to open up a new pot shop just to grow it in hopes that someone's going to buy it to manufacture it.
We don't know that, because none of us up here are in this business.
Okay, I have a quick question for you. How many people buy cows just to have them there, but they're never going to milk it? And see if someone's going to come and get a gallon of milk?
I don't know.
Does that
Probably
happen?
not many. Probably not many.
Probably not anyone, because you can't just have a product wholesale and expect to get a carton of milk out of it without having some type of process to get it from the cow into a carton. So if we're not going to be able to provide a process for these things to be made, then we should just erase this whole thing and keep it as is, and don't even bother creating permits that aren't going to be effective in the town. So I really want you to think about what you're presenting and how it's going to affect the business in town and how it's going to benefit the
Counselor,
town.
I have
'Cause
given,
haven't
I
heard
have
that yet.
given a lot of thought to this, as have the voters of this town.
Who voted no to sell
Voted
it,
no.
which we have
And I
completely
think that
banned.
I think the intent of the vote when they voted no was to not allow recreational marijuana at any level.
Okay.
At any level.
Okay, so let's
And
get
we're,
there.
and we're heading in that direction by doing this. So we are, and to some extent, not 100%, but to
Okay.
some extent, you know, telling the voters of Bridgewater, the vote that they took several, or years ago.
2 years ago,
That
yeah.
we are now going to allow a piece of this recreational portion. No, we're not going to have pot shops. I don't think that was the intent or the language in that.
For sure.
In that ballot question. What has been done to the communities was done through the legislature, because the legislature took that question, rewrote it, and said, okay, if you're a no town, you can do this. If you're a yes town, you can do this. This is how we got here. And I'm trying to play a role as a counselor and to uphold the voters, what the intent of what the voters voted for a couple of years ago to do. And I've already kind of lost that battle by saying, okay, I'll allow one of these. But we're kind of saying we can't do that because what we already have is going to go out of business. So the intent is to be restrictive, and I'm trying to restrict it to one, and to try to be with the voters of how the voters of this town voted, although it'd be close. But that's really what my whole argument has been since day one.
Just so I'm clear, you just want to see if one business would go out of town if we only, would go out of business if we only had one permit in place?
I don't want to see any business leave town.
Okay.
I don't.
Okay, thank you.
So I'm not sure that.
Mr. George has his hand up.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Judge.
Through you to the town attorney. So going on the theme of unintended consequences, and I don't know if you're going to have an answer to this, but I have to pose the question. So right now, as it looks to me, we have the possibility of putting in an ordinance that could adversely affect two legal established businesses that want to go into a legal business within the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. So if we do pass something that ultimately has an adverse effect to them, there's a possibility of us being brought into a suit because of what we've done. Is that a possibility as well?
Yes.
Thank you.
Mr. President, if I may, I'm not sure anyone, I think everyone said their say, and everyone is pretty sure how they're going to vote, unless there's an objection that people want to keep talking about it. And rather than learning about things, pontificating, I'd make a motion to move the question on the amendment.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Any other discussion on that? All those in favor of moving the question as amended?
We're moving the question on the amendment.
On the amendment. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay. So now we're going to take a vote on the motion to amend, the amendment. And we'll do a roll call vote on that.
Can I just be clear about your amendment? That you want to change in the third line below ordered, the number 2 to a 3, and then further down that line, the number 2 to a 1. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yes?
Yes. Yes.
All right then. Mr. Souza?
No.
Mr. Columbotus?
No.
Mr. Wood?
No.
Mr. Gallagher?
Yes.
Mr. George?
No.
Mrs. Loesch? No. Mr. Fitzgibbons?
Yes, with Mr. Gallagher.
2 in favor, 5 against.
Then I'd
motion.
I'd make a motion to move the main question at this point in time. I don't want to go through another hour
Yes,
of
I'll
debate.
entertain a motion to move the ordinance FY 18008 as presented to us.
Second.
There's a second.
Is there a discussion on the
Sure there is.
main item?
Yeah.
Oh,
No.
I moved the
He
question.
moved the question.
Oh, he moved, okay, I
No
thought you were just talking about the...
So we have
then-
not discussed the main item in front of us. So I will be voting against moving that because I had comments about the main item.
Okay, then
And then-
I'll withdraw my motion if you need to speak. I thought people had
No,
their...
let's vote on, I don't know why we're withdrawing, let's vote on it.
Yeah, we had our discussion
Had our
on
discussion.
everything.
I think we're really belaboring this way too long.
Point of information, point of order. We had a discussion on the amendment. We did not have a discussion yet on the main item.
And to move the question doesn't mean that we have to have a discussion. We vote if we move the question or not. Am I correct on that?
I believe he voted to move the question relative to the amendment. I don't believe.
No, I just made a motion to move the question
Okay.
on the main question, and
Main
Mr. George
question.
seconded. So the point
So
of
now
order
we
would be
vote.
Now you can vote on
that we
that.
can
No more-
vote, we can vote on whether or not we want to stop debate.
Correct.
Right. So there is, okay, so the motion is to vote on the main ordinance as presented.
I thought the motion was to move the
Move the
question
question.
on the main
Yeah,
motion.
Let's say yes or no to this right now.
Right.
We need 6 vote, we need 2/3, which is essentially 6 votes anyway here right now. Or is 5 over 2? Fuzzy math.
Yep.
But we need 2/3 to move the question. If we don't have 2/3 to move the question, then
Discussion keeps
continue
going.
debate.
Okay, there'll be a roll call vote to move the question.
Okay.
I'm sorry, can I clarify? So,
Then we go to the main
right, but
thing.
parliamentary
after this.
procedure says we need 2/3 majority to move a question?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
This is
My
to move the
understanding.
question, then we will, after this, if it passes, we will go to the main
We'll just vote.
vote, right. Go ahead.
Okay.
Yep.
On the motion to move the question, Mr. Fitzgibbons?
Yes.
Mrs. Loesch?
No.
Mr. George?
Yes.
Mr. Gallagher?
Yes.
Mr. Wood?
No.
Mr. Columbotus?
No.
Mr. Souza?
Yes.
4 in favor, 3 against.
Mr. Wood?
So, Mr. Wood, it's your floor.
Thank you. If you could bring up the picture, please.
Oh, wow.
I gotta stand over there. I can't see.
It's that one there.
It's the other day.
No, I know, but I think it's just a picture.
I can't see down there.
Is this the black hole that we've gone down? No?
There we go. So I took a with my wife. We took a little vacation weekend up in Montreal this weekend. Coincidentally, we didn't go because of this. Coincidentally, Canada legalized recreational marijuana, and this weekend was their first weekend. What you're seeing here is the thing that Bridgewater is afraid of. The shop looks like an Apple store. It's well-appointed, it's very handsome. The gentleman holding the door is the guard. The French Canadians are crazy about their queues, so they lined up peacefully. They lined up around the corner. I view that as tax dollars standing in line. We walked by the line several times. Most of them were young adults. There was no pushing, shoving. There was no one smoking. There was no one leaving the store stoned out of their head because they just bought a gram of marijuana. The tax revenues for Canada are huge. There's states around the country now, such as Maine, that are moving this direction. For some reason, the town of Bridgewater is deathly afraid that if we have a store that's well-appointed, guarded, and serves the public, as question 4 thought it should, that our town will go down the hole. And, we're going to put up stockades and block people from driving to the shops in Brockton and Waltham and whatnot. And so the article in front of us is not to remove the ban. The article in front of us is to limit where businesses can be done in town. And overall, I'm against that. So I just wanted everyone to see what a shop actually looks like instead of what people believe a shop looks like. And hopefully we can move forward. Thank you.
Any other discussion?
So I'd like to make a comment on that. Thank you very much, Mr. Wood, for sharing that. The town of Bridgewater voted against retail shops. I have no problem supporting that whatsoever, but, thank you for the vacation pictures.
Okay.
Okay, so I'll entertain a motion on the main.
Well, we've had a motion.
Okay, so this requires a roll call vote
On the main motion to approve.
on the ordinance 2018-019, nope, 20008, FY18-008.
Correct. Mr. Souza.
Yes.
Mr. Columbotus.
Yes.
Mr. Wood.
No.
Mr. Gallagher.
No.
Mr. George.
Yes.
Mrs. Loesch.
Yes.
Mr. Fitzgibbons.
Yes, and this is why I didn't want to do this.
Yeah, exactly.
5 in favor, 2 against.
So the ordinance fails.
So to be clear, we can't do anything for 2 years on
2
this?
years.
Correct.
Awesome.
But could I ask, well, I'll ask during manager's report. Moving on to license transactions.
Could we just take
reconsider?
up, if I could make a motion to take up item LJ, just so we can get rid of that too? Not that it matters.
LJ, okay. Don't we have to take all of
Yeah,
L?
theoretically.
No.
Yes.
Don't we need
Yeah,
to take
we do,
L
we do.
as a whole and go through the whole?
Unless we want to suspend the rules.
I'll move on to license transactions. There's under G, petition 2018-019, one-day entertainment license for CNT Inc., 350 Main Street. Do you want to just explain that briefly?
Mr. President, this is just a one-day entertainment license for a private function to be held at CNT on October 27th. A piano player.
Motion to approve.
There's a motion, there's a second. Any discussion? This will be the voice vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. There are no presentations tonight. We'll now move on to the town manager's report. Mr. Dutton.
Mr. President, I just have a few items tonight, and I will begin. Obviously, good news, the town secured a $3 million MassWorks grant to apply towards the cost to completely reconstruct Elm Street, so we're quite pleased with that. And I would just like to take the opportunity to thank the council for taking some actions that helped secure this, including voting for the district infrastructure financing plan, and believe it or not, voting the disposition of the McElwain also helped when the state reviews our grant applications. They look at it sort of holistically, so that a lot more goes into it than just simply what we put in the grant application. So my thanks to the council for that, and certainly anyone connected with getting the grant together. I thank staff and as well as the business owners up there. They really did step up and advocate for their own cause, so I appreciate that as well. We are also in the running for a planning and engineering grant, and in the event that we need to plan for the removal of the High Street Dam. As you know, and I've mentioned before, the High Street Dam is a privately owned dam, and it could potentially be removed with state approval, and in that event, we would have to plan for a replacement of the High Street Bridge, and so fortunately, we're trying to position ourselves for that possibility. We've worked closely with the Nature Conservancy, several state offices, including Fish and Wildlife and NOAA, and they have all been quite helpful in guiding us thus far. So we're quite hopeful that we'll see some good news on that front very soon. I've also just received some cost estimates on the traffic engineering that we want to do in the Central Square area. We've also added a few other intersections that have been quite problematic, including Grove and Bedford Street, which has seen a large number of accidents over the last number of years, and also to plan replacement for the traffic lights along Broad Street. So those are coming up on at least 20 years old and now need some attention. In any case, I will be putting an appropriation request in front of you at the next meeting. It should be roughly $150,000, which actually is pretty good price for the package that we put together. So I'm looking forward to getting that started quite soon. Just an early reminder, rather, about early voting. Continues through next week, and we have info on our website and also on our Facebook page. So please take a look at that. And I will give my twice monthly plug for volunteers again. I will say that we've had great response recently from a lot of younger volunteers and new volunteers, which is great. A lot of new blood coming into our town boards and committees, which is a great thing. And I will say we still have openings, and we're looking to fill some on Conservation Commission, Open Space, Water and Sewer Board, and Board of Health, among some others, but those are the major ones. So if anyone is interested in looking at those potential seats, those boards are a lot of fun. Well, try to say that with a straight face. No, they are. Volunteering for the town is a rewarding and satisfying experience. I know most of the council has done it at one level or another, so I encourage people certainly to reach out and talk to me about any of those possibilities. And happy to answer questions.
Are there any questions to the town manager from the councilors? Mr. Wood.
Thank you. I stopped by Skip's tonight. I checked with the town manager earlier, and I'll ask the same question now that I did earlier. Skip's is doing business under a different name, Seaside, I think it is, but the license says doing business as Skip's. He was actually here for the meeting a couple meetings ago, I think. So that's true. So just for the council's edification, you have instructed him how to do a change of business name, correct?
Correct.
So when I talked to him today, I talked to him on the phone. I was in the shop. He was not there. He said he found the process confusing, that he felt that the town was pushing him again, and that I reminded him that he has 2 meetings before to basically get this done, because we had the revocation meeting on the December 4th meeting, I think. And he was unsure that he could get it done by then. The second question, if I may, through you to the town attorney, is the license was not in the store itself. The staff there told me that Yogi is carrying it around with him. Is that proper?
The CMR basically states that every license has to be displayed in a conspicuous place where it can easily be read. unless he is selling the alcohol on the move, which I don't think is permitted. I would say that it needs to be in the store in a conspicuous place where it can be seen
Okay,
under
so-
the regulations.
So, Mr. Dutton, I just wanted to bring your attention to that as well. And that's all the questions this week. Thank you.
Any other questions to the town manager from the councilors? I have a couple of questions, Mike, on the appropriation that we approved on, I think it was $100,000 for zoning bylaw updates. Is that, we approved that appropriation, right?
Correct.
And have we received any companies, RFPs, or where is that process now?
Actually, I'm glad you asked. I was going to defer to the Councilor Colin Botus if he wanted to weigh in on what's going on, but we have hired Attorney Mark Bobrowski, who's fairly well-known land use attorney in Massachusetts, and the committee that was put together for zoning has met now a few times, and gone through the initial stages of some review of our current zoning. We're doing it in two pieces, so that's one piece. The other piece is the Comprehensive Master Plan Committee. That's being headed up by Judy Barrett, who is working with Mark Bobrowski. She's a fairly well-known planner statewide, and is serving as our consultant on the comprehensive master planning piece of it. What I anticipate is that the committee that will set up to do the comprehensive master planning portion will hear a lot of public input, solicit a lot of public input, and come up with ideas on updates to the master plan. Once we get through the entire process, we will come out of it. It will take a little bit more money, but we'll come out of it with a completely updated master plan, and that completely updated master plan and the committee will inform a lot of the decisions that the zoning committee will be making. And so they'll come back with recommendations. Those recommendations would then go through the process, through the master plan committee, through the planning board, and then ultimately the council in terms of adopting zoning.
So this whole process could bring forth several different types of zoning changes for the council to vote on at some point.
Absolutely.
And it is possible then that these ordinance that we just voted down tonight could come back in that form, in a form not like this, but in a different form in the language in the zoning update.
I would say that I defer to the town attorney on that one.
I think I wouldn't make that assumption. I'd have to do some more research and give you a definitive answer, but you're essentially, what that would be doing is hiding an amendment that's already been voted on within another amendment. It's the same premise. Just because you vote on something in a package of amendments doesn't mean you're not trying to amend something that you've already tried to amend.
But I think that what we've pointed out is that, some of us struggled with the language as counselors, because we're not lawyers, and it appeared that, I wanted to do something, some people wanted to do more, but it failed. So I think, I don't know if that's something that they...
It depends on what it says.
Sure.
Right? It's facts
So I
and
think
circumstances.
that during that study, if those that want to see this move forward in some form should look into that when these changes come forward. That's all. That's where I was going with this question.
I would
Okay.
say that none of the zoning ordinance or ordinances or bylaws we currently have in place are immune from potential suggestions for revision.
Sure, and it's about trying to zone this town out so we could attract more businesses in different areas of the town specific.
Great.
Yes.
Mr. Dutton, through you, Mr. President, what is the timeline for that to be completed?
The Comprehensive Master Plan Committee is about to have it'll have its first meeting, I believe, on November 20th. We're still trying to ensure a date. And Ms. Barrett believes that we can accomplish that piece of it in a I believe she said a 6 to 8 month period.
Okay.
So, and Attorney Bobrowski is probably something roughly along that timeline as well.
Probably a little sooner, yeah.
Thanks.
Any other questions for the town manager, Mr. Fitzgibbons?
Mr. Dutton, if you could give the council and the folks at home an update on the Mitchell School building process, where the town and the school district are, and the next important date coming up within the next couple of weeks?
I can start by telling you the next important date, I believe, is October 29th. There's a meeting in this room at 6:30 of the Mitchell School Building Committee. At that point, the committee will actually vote to narrow down the potential options for the Mitchell School. Right now, the committee, by statute and by regulation, according to...
If I could interrupt? Right now, what we voted on a year or so ago, 2 years ago, whatever it was a feasibility study. We're doing that. We've retained a owner's project manager to walk us through that process and create the documents that the state needs, correct?
Correct.
And so in those documents, they really require at least 3 options to be presented to the school building authority. One is repair only, which is not reimbursable by the school building authority, but it's required that we show that to them. One is add/renovate, which is, what we've got, and let's try to figure out how we can use it best and make sure all the educational programs work and we're doing the best job. And the other is blow it up and build it again. And there's different flavors outside of that, but those are the 3 flavors that we have to come up in with one to check off all the boxes to the SBA, correct?
Correct.
And that needs to be, the meeting here is on the 29th, which I believe is a Monday, and that needs to be in all that paperwork, which has been being worked on for a while now, needs to be in on the 31st. Is that
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for the update.
Yeah, thanks for your update.
Glad I could edify the council.
I wanted to move through things.
Anyone else? Moving on. Discussions. Anyone? There's no discussions. Committee reports, or any committees that wish to make a report
Yep, the
tonight?
Strategic Planning Committee met, as committees should, and we had a presentation by Great Blue, who's the corporation or company that helped us with our survey. So the people who got calls at home or did the link that was posted on our website, and I think a few of us posted it on Facebook as well. We got the results of that survey. It was really interesting. I know the town manager is going to be posting this findings on the website, and we actually recorded that session because I knew what would happen is I wish I was there to see the presentation. Well, we recorded it. So as soon as we can get that up on BTV, all will be able to watch it and hear it firsthand and have the context of what's on the slide and what they were describing. But the thing that stood out the most from that presentation was that people were willing to pay more to have things fixed in town. So great news. Wonder how we're going to get those tax dollars in, but we'll figure that out. So I encourage you all to watch the meeting and look at the survey results. If you have any questions about the survey results, the company was very willing to kind of come back and chop the data in different ways for us. So again, if there's, when you're looking at the slide, something you would like to see something dive, a little bit deeper, we're happy to send that along and get that back to you.
Thank you. Any other committee reports, Mr. Fitzgibbons?
On the Public Safety Committee, and first of all, thank you to Mr. George and Mr. Chase for being my colleagues there. We did have another meeting where we kind of put some dollars down to what the needs of public safety, particularly in fire, police, and highway were, and it's very nice that Ms. Loesch, being the SMART chairman, she has recorded the meeting so people can see, and also mentions that people are willing to pay to improve their services because we have a lot of needs coming up. So I was directed as the chair of the committee to write up a report that we'll deliver to you in a November meeting. I'm not sure whether it's going to be the first or the second meeting of November, but we'll have one more meeting before then to edit it and make sure that, everything is the way we want to say it, and we'll present that to you in November as part of the input to the budget process. So thank you.
Any other committee reports, Mr. Wood?
So Budget and Finance met tonight. One of our top discussion items was on the budget resolution. So we've started working on that. It looks like it'll look a little bit like last year's, a lot like last year's. We talked in some details about the bullet items. And I think you'll hear a good story about that and where our budget process is going. And I should also say that the last week, several of us on the ad hoc, what are we called the ad hoc budget committee?
School liaison.
Liaison.
School budget liaison.
Went over to the budget committee meeting at the school and listened to and participated in several discussions about their upcoming thoughts about the next fiscal year. So that was quite interesting.
Any other committee reports? Moving on to legislation for action under A, Order FY 19-015, Transfer Order Capital Transfer for LED Light Conversion. The Budget and Finance Committee voted 3-0 on 9/11/18 to recommend approval. The Finance Committee voted 5-0 at their meeting on October 15th, 2018. The council conducted a duly advertised public hearing on October 9th, 2018. This measure may be finally considered this evening, pending the adoption of the amended account numbers. And I refer you to item A in your packet.
Motion to approve.
There's a motion to approve.
Second.
And there's a
Motion-
second.
Motion to amend as indicated.
Second.
Is there any discussion to motion the amendment? All those in favor? Aye. On the amendment, now on the main motion to approve?
I have discussion on that, if I may. I'm glad we got a finance committee quorum together.
I second that.
Okay, all those, this requires a roll call vote. 9/10, which is all of us.
Mr. Fitzgibbons.
Yes.
Mrs. Loesch.
Yes.
Mr. George.
Yes.
Mr. Gallagher.
Yes.
Mr. Wood.
Yes.
Mr. Columbotus.
Yes.
Mr. Souza.
Yes.
7 in favor, none against.
Order passes. Next item, Order FY 19-016, Transfer Order Sewer and Water Reserve Special Purpose for Loan Down, Pay Down. The
Motion
Budget and
to approve.
Finance Committee voted, I just want to read the...
My bad, I
Yep.
don't have.
The Budget and Finance Committee voted 3-0 on 9/11 to recommend approval. The Finance Committee voted 5-0 at their meeting on 10/15 for approval. This measure may be finally considered this evening, pending the adoption of amended account numbers.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Motion to amend as indicated.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor on the motion to amend?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion to approve. This does require roll call vote.
Mr. Souza.
Yes.
Mr. Columbotus.
Yes.
Mr. Wood.
Yes.
Mr. Gallagher.
Yes.
Mr. George.
Yes.
Mrs. Loesch.
Yes.
Mr. Fitzgibbons.
Yes.
7 in favor, none against.
Item C, Order FY 19-017, Transfer Order Town Manager Special Account to Capital Funds. The Budget and Finance Committee voted 3-0 on 9/11/18 to recommend approval. The Finance Committee voted 5-0 to approve at their meeting held on 10/15/18. This measure may be finally considered this evening, pending the adoption of amended account numbers.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Motion to amend as indicated.
Second.
Any discussion on the motions? All those in favor on the motions as amended?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Now we're acting under the main motion, and this requires a roll call vote.
Mr. Fitzgibbons.
Yes.
Mrs. Loesch.
Yes.
Mr. George.
Yes.
Mr. Gallagher.
Yes.
Mr. Wood.
Yes.
Mr. Columbotus.
Yes.
Mr. Souza.
Yes.
7 in favor, none against.
Motion passes. Item D, Order FY 19-018, Transfer Order Appropriation of Street Assessment. The Budget and Finance Committee voted 3-0 on 9/11/18 to recommend approval. The Finance Committee voted 5-0 at their meeting held on 10/15/18 for approval. The council conducted a duly advertised public hearing on October 9th, 2018. Therefore, this matter may be finally considered this evening.
Motion to approve.
Second.
There's a motion to approve in a second. Any discussion, Mr. Fitzgibbons or Mr. Wood? Mr. Wood?
Yeah, this is a 9/10 vote again. I think it's very important that the town undertakes this. Several of my constituents and many around town comment on the state of the condition of our towns, roadways and sidewalks and signage. And this will create an entire catalog of defects and locations and other pieces that will be critical to planning out repairs, replacement, and strategy going forward. So I hope everybody votes in favor.
Mr. Columbotus?
I would echo Mr. Wood's comments. An efficient and safe infrastructure system that facilitates all modes of transportation is really critical to economic development, to getting private capital to invest in town and to protect the quality of life for residents. So I heartily approve this appropriation.
Any further discussion? This does require a roll call vote.
Mr. Souza.
Yes.
Mr. Columbotus.
Yes.
Mr. Wood.
Yes.
Mr. Gallagher.
Yes.
Mr. George?
Yes.
Mrs. Loesch?
Yes.
Mr. Fitzgibbons?
Yes.
7 in favor, none against.
Moving on to E, Order FY19-022, Transfer Order, Bridgewater Police Association Contract Settlement Funding. At the Budget and Finance Committee meeting on 9/25/18, they voted 3-0 to recommend approval. The Finance Committee voted 4-0 to 1 to approve at their meeting held on October 15th, 2018. This measure may be finally considered this evening pending the adoption of amended account numbers.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Motion to amend is indicated.
Second.
All those in favor of the motions? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, we're voting on the amended.
I'd like to have discussion on the main motion. I do notice, the
No?
police association's president's here.
Oh.
Thank you. No, I just wanted to recognize Mr. Demora and thank him for, getting a contract together that's in the best interests of his folks on the police force, but also in the best interests of the town, and really, always being a good partner for us. It's certainly appreciated by me, and I don't know, I'm sure I speak for the rest of the council, but if they want to say anything, I'd certainly defer to them.
All right. Okay, we're voting on the adoption of the amendments. All those in favor?
No, we're on the main motion.
On the main
I
motion.
don't remember taking that other vote. All right, this does require a roll call vote.
Mr. Fitzgibbons?
Yes.
Mrs. Loesch?
Yes.
Mr. George?
Yes.
Mr. Gallagher?
Yes.
Mr. Wood?
Yes.
Mr. Columbotus?
Yes.
Mr. Souza?
Yes.
7 in favor, none against.
Okay, moving along to Order FY19-026, Transfer Order Sewer Enterprise Capital Special Purpose. The Finance Committee voted 5-0 to approve this at their meeting held on October 15th, 2018. The Budget and Finance Committee met on 10/23/2018 and will provide their disposition at the full council. I'll refer to Councilor Wood on this.
1 second. Are we on 25 or 26?
26.
25.
Did I miss one?
Harvest Pond.
Oh, I missed one.
No,
All
you
right.
missed one. You missed 25.
Right, all right. So, all right, so I'll strike what I just said. FY '25, transfer to water reserve transfer for Carver's Pond Treatment Plant roof repairs. The Budget and Finance Committee voted 3-0 on 9/25/18 to recommend approval. The Finance Committee voted 5-0 to approve at their meeting held on October 15th, 2018. This measure may be finally considered this evening, pending the adoption of amended account numbers.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Motion to amend is indicated, and also correct the scrivener's error at the top saying Carvery Pond.
Yes. To second that.
Any discussion on the amendments?
Just a clarification, because we've made amendments to the account numbers along the way. Sometimes the working process doesn't have the final account numbers, so the numbers don't change, but the account numbers might when it comes before us, so it's all in good form.
Right.
So the numbers are good.
Yes.
Numbers are good. All those in favor of the amendments?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, now, all those in, this does require a roll call vote.
Mr. Souza?
Yes.
Mr. Columbotus?
Yes.
Mr. Wood?
Yes.
Mr. Gallagher?
Yes.
Mr. George?
Yes.
Mrs. Loesch?
Yes.
Mr. Fitzgibbons?
Yes.
7 in favor, none against.
Moving on to item G, Order FY19-026, transfer of sewer enterprise capital special purposes. The Finance Committee voted 5-0 to approve at their meeting held on October 15th, 2018. The Budget and Finance Committee met this evening, and I'll refer to Councilor Wood on the disposition of the Budget and Finance Committee.
Yes, the vote was 2-0 in favor of recommending this to council.
Okay. I'll entertain a motion to approve. There's a motion to approve by Mr. Fitzgibbons. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Wood. Any discussion? This does require a roll call vote.
Mr. Fitzgibbons?
Yes.
Mrs. Loesch?
Yes.
Mr. George?
Yes.
Mr. Gallagher?
Yes.
Mr. Wood?
Yes.
Mr. Columbotus?
Yes.
Mr. Souza?
Yes.
7 in favor, none against.
Order passes. Acting under H, Order FY19-027, transfer order CPC funding for McElwain School redevelopment. The Finance Committee voted 5-0 to approve at their meeting held on October 15th, 2018. The Budget and Finance Committee met on October 23rd, and I will refer to Councilor Wood for the disposition of the Budget and Finance Committee meeting. There's 2 votes. they had before us.
That's correct. That's correct. And we voted 2-0 in favor of recommending this, and I will point out the letter supporting this from the CPC.
Motion to approve?
Second.
There's a motion and there's a second to approve.
I'd just like to follow up on Mr. Wood's comments that Ms. Desjardins has put in the rationale behind why the CPC is in favor of this.
Any other discussion? This does require a roll call vote, and it requires
Majority.
5 of the councilors present,
That's correct.
5 or more, but does require a roll call vote.
Mr. Souza.
Yes.
Mr. Columbotus.
Yes.
Mr. Wood.
Yes.
Mr. Gallagher.
Yes.
Mr. George.
Yes.
Mrs. Loesch.
Yes.
Mr. Fitzgibbons.
Yes.
7 in favor, none against.
Motion passes. Acting under I, Ordinance FY19-002, General Ordinance, amend Administrative Code, temporary repair to private ways. At their meeting held on October 1st, 2018, the Rules and Procedures Committee voted 3-0 to recommend approval of this measure. This measure has been duly advertised in the enterprise and on the town website for final consideration, therefore may be finally voted on this evening. I'll entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second?
There's a motion, there's a second. Any discussion? This only requires a majority of the full council, which is 5. Does this require a roll call? Yes. Roll call vote.
Mr. Fitzgibbons.
Yes.
Mrs. Loesch.
Yes.
Mr. George.
Yes.
Mr. Gallagher.
Yes.
Mr. Wood.
Yes.
Mr. Columbotus.
Yes.
Mr. Souza.
Yes.
7 in favor, none against.
Moving right along, item J, we're getting there. Ordinance FY19-013, General Ordinance, recreational marijuana establishments forbidden and exceptions. In full. The Rules and Procedure Committee voted 2-1 to recommend this measure with amendments at their meeting held on October 1st, 2018. This measure has been duly advertised in the enterprise and on the town's website for final consideration, therefore may be finally considered this evening.
I'm sorry, was it 2-1 or 3-0? Because that's what I have on
It was
the
2-1. It was
ordinance.
mismarked on the
Okay.
order. I think it's marked
you.
in the
Thank
in the
you.
agenda correctly.
I'll entertain a motion to approve ordinance FY19-013.
So moved.
Is there a second? I'll second that. Any discussion? Yes, Mr. Fitzgibbons.
What's the effect of this, Attorney Rollins? Can we do this tonight, given what we just did?
Yeah, this, this does not change anything. There's still, you all have still passed a zoning ordinance that allows for marijuana cultivation, marijuana product manufacturing, marijuana testing. This essentially is saying the same thing. It's saying that you're prohibited from operating a marijuana establishment other than those 3 exceptions as are defined in 94G1 and our current ordinances.
But at this point, someone could open up a marijuana growing facility next to Roche Brothers,
Yes.
as of right.
There,
Correct.
after tonight's vote, there are several things that have to be discussed.
Okay, all right, so this is in concert with what we just, this is in concert with the zoning amendment that we already put in place.
Correct.
And it's not nullified by the vote we just took?
No.
Okay, thank you.
Any other discussion? Mr. Wood?
I was the one on the rules and procedures, believe it or not. My point there and my point tonight for everyone here, I don't know if it will prevail. This duplicates the effort that's already in place. There is already a ban in Bridgewater for the items that this speaks to. This does not strengthen that ban. It does not change that ban. It doesn't help our town in any way or shape or form. If a future council decides to remove the ban, or the court decides to remove a ban, the council in the future, if it decides to remove the ban, this is easier to remove than the zoning ordinance itself. So I would imagine this would fall first and the other one falls second. So to me, there's no addition to it. In other towns that have town meeting, it's more, they add the 2 efforts because it's more difficult in town meeting possibly to prevail, but here, I don't see it adds anything to the effort to ban particular establishments.
Mr. Columbotus.
Now that we've spent the $400 or $500 to advertise this ordinance, I guess I'll approve it, but seems like a waste of money, as Mr. Wood pointed out. So I will be voting in favor.
Any other discussion? This does require a roll call vote and requires a majority of the full council, or 5 of us. Or 5.
Mr. Souza.
Yes.
Mr. Columbotus.
Yes.
Mr. Wood.
No.
Mr. Gallagher.
Yes.
Mr. George.
Yes.
Mrs. Loesch.
Yes.
Mr. Fitzgibbons.
Yes.
6 in favor, 1 against.
Moving on to old business, there is none. New business, we have Resolution FY19-001, the 2019 council meeting dates. I'll refer to Councilor Loesch, who has put this together.
Yes, the torch has been passed to me to put this together, even though it does go a little bit aside from our rules that say it should be, but we have a lot of asterisks. So we're just putting that out there for our meetings for 2019. I don't think it needs to get referred anywhere. I think we're all pretty straightforward on dates, but it's here for us.
Did you
for
check?
consumption.
Did you check the World Series schedule for 2019?
I do not watch baseball. Go Yankees. No, I'm just kidding.
If I could, I'll just add, I think this is a privilege of the chair of the Rules and Procedures to put these dates together. That's why the torch was passed to the current chair.
So this is just first reading, we don't do anything, it'll just come back.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you for that.
Great.
Citizens' comments. I will open the floor up to any citizen here who wishes to address the council in citizens' comments.
Hi, I'm Taylor Sullivan, 250 Moreland Park. First off, thank you, Dennis, for what you did earlier. However, I think that there was some confusion. I don't think the intent of what you were doing, and then when you voted no on it, essentially, as Aisha mentioned, now they can be put anywhere cultivating, product manufacturing. But that's something that I'm sure you guys will speak with the town attorney, and I think there are other ways that you can go about that. But beside that point, Councilor Wood, I'm growing so frustrated coming up here because I know the regulations, many of us know the regulations in and out. We've met with municipal attorneys, we met with people in the state, and I resent comments from Councilor Wood that we only need a zoning. If you ask a municipal attorney who's sitting right here to prevent conversion, to prevent Theory Wellness and ACS from converting to retail, zoning does not cover that. Zoning is the time and place, and general is the activity. So if you don't have a general bylaw, you cannot prevent the conversion of an RMD. It's in the regulations. Contact the CCC, they'll tell you. I've spoken with Kay Doyle, who's a commissioner, and gotten that information. But just one little comment like that could influence someone else in the council like Peter, who voted in favor for the general ordinance to go through. For a second, you could have thought, oh, we don't need the general, this is too restrictive. One little comment like that of misinformation that is completely inaccurate could have changed the trajectory of that vote. So I sit here so frustrated because I'm like, listen, I come here as a citizen. I've spent, many of our members, it's been like a part-time job. And so just comments like that, I sit there and I'm like, this could change the way a vote could go. You have to know these regulations in and out. You have to, because what you're voting on is the future. Things like this make me think that we should go back to town meeting. And then the comment from Sean George about there are people that contact you. Is it public record that, like, if I come up here and make a statement verbally, if I'm emailing, is that public record?
Yes.
Because so I feel like then that should all be brought out, because statements like, well, it shouldn't be just the people that come up here, then why do I come up here then? If I can sit behind my computer and then not hire a sitter to watch my children and have my son have a tantrum and cry tonight because I'm here, well, maybe I'll just sit behind my computer and have my comments be heard. I was under the understanding that actually making the effort to come here for a year and a half had something, and you're telling me, no, well, I get emails. Well, you know what? That's public record. I think we have every right to see everything that comes to you, because I would guarantee there's nobody or very few people in Bridgewater that are writing to you saying, I really want testing facilities. Retail shops, maybe. There are people that really want to get their hands and walk to it. I have seen it, but I doubt there are people writing you saying they really want testing unless they want to get in the business themselves. So I'm really disappointed because I think a lot of some of the counselors have not done their research, and I think it's horrible that they make statements that are completely inaccurate. And we have an attorney here that would tell you you need a general. There are some towns that just have a general to ban things, and there are some towns that just have a zoning. But if you contact the Cannabis Control Commission, they will tell you you need both for a properly enacted ban. Thank you.
Are there any other citizens here that wish to speak in citizens' comments? Anyone else? Seeing none, I'll move on to council comments, and I'll start with Councilor Fitzgibbons.
Go Red Sox.
Okay, there's a saying that I had to look up because I knew I was going to say it wrong. Cutting off the nose to spite the face. I think that's what happened here tonight. We wanted to stand and dig in our laurels and morals, and now we have nothing. So when we are working together as a council, we really, to Mr. George's point, is we're like thinking about the whole entire town, and we're not just doing our own personal thoughts, and we're not just doing our, how many people live in District 1. I have to think outside of that. So when we can talk about this in 2 years, it'll be the end of my term, so hopefully I'm still here and I'll be able to have some input, because you could have a whole new council at that time. To be able to make a decision on something that they weren't sitting through for many, many years. I just think that we did not perform well in that situation. However, one other thing is that I forgot to mention in council committee reports is that the Rules and Procedure Committee will be meeting on the 29th. Thank you. And so if anyone wants to come to that meeting, that is open. And we won't meet. I hope everyone has a safe and happy Halloween.
Mr. George?
So, in mellowing with age, I probably should take a little bit of time to gather my thoughts, but I'm not going to. I would really like people to look at what just transpired today and compare it to town meeting. If memory serves me correctly, town meeting probably drew about 2% of the registered voters that spoke for the entire town, that didn't allow people that couldn't make town meeting to voice their opinion, actually discounted them to the point where they weren't heard. I did not say that people coming here had less of a voice than people that cannot come here. My statement was, I have to weigh all of the feedback that I get. And for me to sit here and listen to someone basically call me a liar, I don't really appreciate that. I don't. And I'll tell you exactly why people don't come here if they don't agree with certain people, is because if you want to see it, look at the hearings that we had. The people, the very few people that stood up there that were for retail were catcalled, they were called names. It was disappointing. Now do you understand why people don't want to come here? This is the job that we have. It's not a popularity contest. So for me to sit there and have someone say to me, let's have a public record because you don't believe what I'm saying, I take that personally. So I hope the next time anyone gets up there for public comment, you choose your words carefully. Because as much as our words have powerful meaning, so don't the people that are listening right now. Thank you.
Mr. Wooden?
Thank you. A year ago, we put the ban in place, and tonight's action really didn't change that, so I guess I'm kind of satisfied, although I've made it very clear that I fully expected that the current establishments would convert, and that would bring tremendous amount of tax dollars to the town of Bridgewater. I've been on budget and finance for quite a while. Every year is a struggle. Last year was a tremendous struggle. This year is going to be a struggle. And it looks like if there's any economic downturn in the future, it's going to be very harmful to Bridgewater. I look at an establishment and I see $900,000 in tax dollars. We can't build stockade fences and make this a drug-free zone. That's ridiculous. It's not going to happen. Can't happen. Anyone who wants pot is going to get pot. The state voted to legalize it. The state voted to establish shops. The state voted to allow retail use. That's the environment we live in. I'm looking at this from an economic point of view because we in the town of Bridgewater are not going to change what happened at the state level. And so I know the rules just as well as anyone else in this room. And if you had emailed a piece of information on general ordinance versus zoning ordinance, then we would have had that discussion. But I didn't get an email like that. So if that's true, that's a piece of information that's new. Thank you.
Mr. Columbotus.
I think we've struck a good compromise regarding marijuana. People are concerned about recreational sales, so we banned that. And I just want to remind people that the town vote that allows on the state ballot initiative was 50.6% to disallow recreational sales in the state, and 49, what is the math? 49.4. So it was close. And so I'm not going to take marching orders from a bare majority just because it's a bare majority. I'm going to think about all the issues. I'm going to think about the tax revenue. I'm going to think about people's concerns. And that's informed my votes. Thank you.
Mr. Souza.
It all boils down to one thing. Look around this town. How many new businesses have come in here in the past 5 years? Drive out of town on any main road. As soon as you cross the line, what do you see? All kinds of new little businesses, right? We've drove them away. Now we're scrambling to try to find money. Is the answer selling recreational marijuana? I say no, okay? We should have been moving 5 years ago in trying to develop a plan to bring in new businesses. Okay, I've talked about it since I got on the council, talked to everyone else, and very little came out of it except for now we have a plan, and if I understood this right, the master plan should be done in 6 to 8 months, and then that's going to go over to the people who are the same people who are doing the zoning of the town. And is that going to take another 6 to 8 months, or is that coinciding with the first 6 to 8 months? So how do you finish something in 6 to 8 months and give it to the other group to use as a basis and have them complete at the same time? That's why I'm kind of a little confused here. You got to finish one thing and pass it off before you can use it. In any case, we've sat on our hands too long, and we really have to keep going, and we have to get some businesses in town, and that's where the revenue is going to come from. You know, I mean, how much can our taxpayers go up? Look around. How many senior citizens are packing up and getting out of town? You know, they can't afford to live here. And if we continue going in the direction that we're going, just relying on the taxpayers and future recreational marijuana, we're not going to be worth much.
I thought tonight was a good meeting, but I just want to take a shout out to our town manager and his staff for the effort that they put into securing that $3 million grant that we received last week with the lieutenant governor and our state rep here in this council chamber. It was a good feeling in the town, and I think that grant, with other sources from the town, will do a lot of work on Elm Street that will attract a lot of business. That's what we need to be doing. On that note, I want to remind everybody that early voting is going on, and if you don't have an opportunity to vote early, you can vote on November 6th, and I hope that you do, because we do not meet until after that date, and there's a lot on the ballot for everybody to vote for. Veterans Day is November 11th, and if you have time to come over to East Bridgewater to participate in either march or watch the parade, I am encouraging you to do that. I hope to see my colleagues over there as well. And hope everybody has a happy Halloween, and go Red Sox. Thank you. We do not have an executive session this evening.
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
There's a motion, there's a second. Any discussion? Only to say that our next meeting is 3 weeks from tonight, November 13th, 2018, at 7:30 PM. All those in favor? Aye. We are adjourned.
We're doing other work. I mean, we're kind of, the committee I'm on, we're kind of doing the format, like the format's all. We don't have any. We're housekeeping, and they're going to plug that right